It is 7:30 p.m. Your textbook is open, your notebook is ready, and your pen is in your hand. But you stare at the first question, and then you decide to check your phone. You tell yourself you will start right after replying to one message. Suddenly, it is 10:45 p.m., and your brain has completed a 3-hour masterclass in everything except the chapter you intended to study. When this happens, it is easy to assume you lack discipline or focus, but there is a crucial psychological distinction to make here. Saying, "I don't feel like studying," is entirely different from "I cannot study." The friction you feel isn't an inability to learn the material, it is an inability to initiate the action. This chart shows how that friction turns into a trap. When a task feels too large, your brain reacts with avoidance. You open a social media app, which makes you feel guilty. That guilt adds psychological weight to the task, making it feel even more overwhelming. And the greater the overwhelm, the more you avoid it. You do not have to wait for a sudden burst of inspiration to break this loop. Motivation fluctuates with sleep, mood, stress, and hunger. If your study system depends on feeling ready, your schedule is controlled by a changing emotion. The 10-minute formula is designed specifically to bypass the need for motivation, giving you a way to start even when the feeling isn't there. To make this work, you need strict physical parameters. First, isolate your study materials, one book, one notebook. Second, get a standalone physical timer. And third, move your phone entirely out of the room. You are not trying to prove you have ironclad discipline. By removing the phone from arm's reach, you are designing a physical environment where your willpower has less work to do, completely eliminating the immediate friction of having to ignore a distraction. This timeline tracks the first 10 minutes of your study block. The very first minute is dedicated strictly to preparation. Your only job is to put your phone away and open a single chapter on your desk. The physical removal of the phone is mandatory because every vibration is another decision your brain has to make. You cannot ask your brain to focus on a textbook while a phone sits next to it. In the second minute, you define your target. Study chemistry is not an actionable task. It is a cloud of uncertainty. You have to shrink the starting point. Replace the broad subject with a highly specific micro-target, like reading the first 2 pages. There is a practical rule here. If the task you chose is so large it requires a motivational speech before starting, your task parameter is still too large. Large goals create a massive psychological entry point. By shrinking the scope down to a few paragraphs or a single question, you strip away the uncertainty. You give your brain a concrete, non-threatening action to execute. Now we enter the core execution phase. For the next 5 minutes, you actively engage with the specific micro-target you just set. During this window, you must employ the start ugly principle. Many students procrastinate because they expect their study session to immediately look and feel productive. You have to lower that expectation. Your first 10 minutes do not need to be impressive. Your handwriting can be messy. Your initial attempt at an answer can be completely wrong, and your diagrams can look like they were drawn during an earthquake. All of that is an acceptable, expected outcome. A student who writes a terrible first answer has material they can improve. A student who waits for the perfect mood, the perfect desk setup, and perfect concentration ends up producing 0 answers. Starting is a completely separate skill from performing perfectly. When you detach the mechanical act of beginning from the heavy pressure of getting everything right, the barrier to action drops. You start badly, and you improve while moving. At minute 7, the input phase ends. We transition to the retrieve phase, where passive reading stops and active memory testing begins. It is tempting to spend these 2 minutes simply rereading the textbook because it feels easy and familiar. But rereading creates a false illusion of mastery. You recognize the words on the page, and your brain tricks you into thinking you have memorized the concept. Instead, you need to test your retention. Stop looking at the material and attempt to write down 3 core points entirely from memory. This will immediately expose the gaps in your understanding. To make sure you are actually retrieving information, physically remove the reference material from your view. Force yourself into that genuine cognitive struggle where you have to pull the answer out of your own head. This creates an immediate feedback loop. You study, you retrieve, you discover what you missed, and you correct it. This upgrades your 10 minutes into verified learning. At minute 9, the timer rings. The required commitment is over, and you enter the final minute of evaluation. This chart is your decision matrix. If you still feel resistance to studying, identify the specific cause. If it is boredom, turn the next 10 minutes into an explanation challenge. If you are confused, write down one precise question detailing exactly what you don't understand. If it is fear of the material, start with the easiest question you can find to build immediate competence. However, if you run this evaluation and realize you are genuinely physically exhausted, you stop. Forcing another hour of ineffective reading when your brain needs recovery is counterproductive. If you stop at 10 minutes, you still completed a real study action. You bypassed the procrastination, initiated the behavior, and made a guilt-free choice based on your actual capacity. Whether you continued for another hour or closed the book at minute 10, you successfully defeated the hardest obstacle in academics, the vast distance between intending to study and actually beginning. Now, put this into practice with a 7-day challenge. Choose one fixed start time every single day. When that time arrives, commit to just one 10-minute block. Put the phone away, set the timer, and start. During this week, you must change how you measure success. Do not track how many hours you accumulated. Track the number of times you successfully started. We often imagine that motivation leads to study, which leads to success, but real life operates in reverse. Taking a small action creates visible progress. That progress generates confidence, and that confidence creates the motivation to do more. A syllabus is finished one chapter at a time, and a mountain is climbed one step at a time. The ultimate goal is not to become the student who constantly feels motivated to work. The goal is to become the student who knows exactly how to manufacture a beginning small enough to guarantee action.